Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Scrappy Piano Teacher. If you are new here, I am Jacqueline Mrozik, but you can call me Jackie. And this is the podcast where independent music teachers get real talk, encouragement, and sometimes a little sarcasm about what it's really like to run a music studio. Today's episode is going to be a little bit more reflective because we are talking about practice. And if you've been teaching for any length of time at all, like even for 5 minutes, then you know as well as I do that practice is one of the biggest challenges that we face as teachers. I don't have a magic solution, sorry, and I'm not going to pretend like I do, but what I do have is a little bit of encouragement, some perspective, and a look inside the practice workshop I ran in my own studio. My hope today for you is that it stirs up some fresh thinking about how we prepare our students to actually practice at home, not just play their pieces, but to understand the act of practicing itself, right? We're teachers, we teach music. Do we teach practice? Maybe, hopefully. Before I jump into the workshop, let me share a little about the OhioMTA State Conference that I attended with my good friend, Elizabeth Swift, who, by the way, was just recognized as the 2025 Certified Teacher of the Year in Ohio. Yay. Elizabeth, woo! The conference itself ran Thursday through Saturday, but because of our teaching schedules, Elizabeth and I arrived Thursday evening for the banquet, so we attended all the sessions on Friday, and then we zipped back home right afterwards. So yes, we missed some incredibly fantastic sessions on Thursday and Saturday, but I have to tell you, I was pretty impressed with how packed full of awesomeness Friday was. It was really good. One of my favorite sessions was in the afternoon. It was Self-Care Essentials, Strategies for Preventing Teacher Burnout. And it was led by Dr. Paula Savito. I think and hope that I'm saying that right. She's DMA NCTM from the University of Michigan. Okay, I am a Buckeye fan. I'm not going to lie. It hurt a little bit when I heard that she was from Michigan, but she more than earned my respect. I was like, wow, just don't tell any of my Ohio people. Then there was also a fascinating session on contemporary composer Emma Lou Deemer. I think I'm saying that right too. Her music is so exploratory. Outer space themes, they pluck the insides of the piano, just all kinds of creative boundary pushing work. That was very interesting. The lovely Amy Chaplin from Piano Pantry podcast was there, and I was so excited to see her face. She led a session on audiation, and it was a blast because she had us up out of our chairs singing and moving, which that energy really was necessary because by the time her session came along, we had been sitting there for a while. And finally, Jana Williamson, who I love and adore, traveled in from Illinois to share her session, which was titled Stepping Up, the Unexpected Role of Leadership in the Piano Studio. She gave us a refreshing reminder that there are things we can control in the studio and things we simply cannot control. And as we were talking about this, or should I say as she was talking about this, I looked around the room briefly and everyone in there, all the teachers, just nodding along like, yep, we understand what you're talking about. And one of her reminders really connected to practice. You know, what can we control in the studio about practice and what can we control outside of the studio about practice? Because let's face it, we cannot control our students' schedules. We can't control their parents' involvement or what goes on at home. And most importantly, we can't control how much they practice outside of the studio. What we can control is what happens inside of our lessons. We can show the students how to practice. We can set up a simple practice routine and we can keep the conversation alive, right? We can't control their home hours, but we can guide how they use the minutes that they do have. And this makes me think of guidance for students and maybe not putting on the guilt. So, example, do any of you have a high schooler that might be juggling, I don't know, CCP classes, AP classes, a job, sports, or maybe they're just trying to survive high school, right? They might genuinely only have 1 or 2 days a week to practice, And instead of stressing about that, we can instead help them create a realistic approach. Now, let's compare that to maybe a third grader who can practice daily. And of course, their pieces and music is going to be much shorter, a little bit more simple, right? Without variety, their routine can feel incredibly repetitive and they can dread it. I have a feeling that there might be more students who dread practice than we like to admit. And that's for all of us. I think I might be included in that equation as much as I hate to admit that, but it does happen. So, this is where we want to step in and think about some creative strategies and help them know what to practice each day. And here's the big reminder. Again, I'm going to bring this up. We don't want to make students feel guilty about the amount of time that they're able to practice. Many kids do not control their schedules. Honestly, a lot of times, even us adults aren't able to control our schedules. We're all limited by family, work, and life. Our job is to equip our students, not to shame them. So if your studio expects rigorous daily practice, that is fine. That is great. There is a place for that. But those expectations need to be crystal clear at the start with parents and revisited when the student's life changes a bit as they grow older. So this ties back to your teaching philosophy and policies, which I've covered in previous episodes. So if you go back through the teaching philosophy questions, I have a resource on my website if you want to check that out or listen to the episode as well. But as you ask yourself these questions, it's good for you to know as you take students on to help avoid that frustration down the road if their practice habits don't align with your philosophy. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch gears and tell you a little bit about my practice workshop and why I did a practice workshop this year. So every year, I start the week before Labor Day. And then the week of Labor Day, I do group classes for everyone. I mean, everyone. I don't care if they're already in buddy lessons and group lessons and private lessons. I merge them all together, mainly because I don't teach on Labor Day. And so it just makes sense. It has worked out really, really well every year because it gives us a good start to the year of expectations. We do some ensemble work. We do all kinds of things. This is the first year that I've labeled it as a quote unquote practice workshop. And I have to tell you, it went so well. And I've already been seeing results from that as we're nearing the end of September that I'm pretty sure I'm going to be doing this for a long, long time. And I just thought, this would be a good way for us to just talk about the upcoming year, talk about what our goals are and how we are going to attain those and how we're going to practice at home. So this is what we did. Starting out, I always like to do some kind of an icebreaker warm up. So I decided for this year, we were just going to do a simple true or false about practice. Some were a little bit more silly, like true or false. We're more efficient practicers with a cat in a lap, or true or false. Your piano should be directly next to the family TV while your father is watching the football game at full volume. I mean, obviously, hello. But it really got them to stop and think, and it got them giggling. And suddenly we were having really good conversations about practicing. And I was getting a really good insight as to the setup that students were having at home. So I'm going to put together a resource about this workshop, by the way, and I'll have those true or false questions on there if you want them. So next, after that, all the students had to pull out a piece of paper and write down all the days of the week. And under each day, they had to map out their schedule. So school, sports, lessons, jobs, everything. Then we looked at where the windows of time might be and talked about attaching practice to a habit that they already had. So example, homeschoolers might link it to schoolwork. I mean, they're already doing schoolwork every day. Why not throw a piano in there? Busy kids might practice right after their daily snack. You get home. What's the first thing most kids do? They run to the pantry and they grab a snack. After the snack, piano practice. I think the hardest part for students really is just starting and just getting into the routine. So attaching that practice to something consistent makes it a lot easier. Then what I had them do is I had them pull out their actual music. Hey guys, let's take a look at it. What would be your approach at home? What would you be doing? We talked about the difference between practicing, playing, and performing. If you're just running through your piece of music 3 times from start to finish and, check, 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 bada bing, bada boom, well, is that really practicing or is that playing? And every time you play for me in lessons, well, that's a performance, right? How many times have we all heard of, Oh, it just doesn't sound like this at home. It sounds so much better at home than it does here. Well, that's because you're hopefully practicing at home. But here in lessons, that is a form of a performance. And, so we talked about what real practice looks like, finding the tricky spots. How are you supposed to approach them? What are you supposed to do? Then after that conversation, I showed them a short video. I always felt a little bit weird about showing videos and lessons, but I'm learning that it's not that big of a deal for my group piano weeks, and they often enjoy it. And I keep them very short. I try to find videos that are like 3 minutes long ish. But this was a great video. It was about how the brain builds pathways when we learn something new. And then we did a quick hands-on experiment. So we just took a piece of paper, rolled it up, taped it together. I had holes cut throughout the paper, and then we were dropping beads through it to get from one side to the next. And so, of course, a lot of beads fell through the holes at first, which I explained to the students. This is when we learn something new. You're not going to retain all the information. Like, some of the information is going to fall through. But the more we repeat it, the stronger that pathway becomes. And so it's like the holes getting covered up. And the kids loved seeing that in action. And then at the very end, I gave them a chance to be really creative. We made some abacuses. What's the plural? Abacus. Plural abacus to take home. So I let them color them. There was lots of animals and rainbows, but there was also a lot of music symbols too. So I felt justified that they were, practicing drawing music symbols. And this I will put in the show notes. It came from a blog post, an old blog post from composecreate.com. So I'll put that on there. She lists off the materials and everything, and I just followed it to a T, and it was a hit. It was really fun. It was creative, and it gave students a tool to remember what practice looks like. And shockingly enough, they are using them, and they're all using them a little bit differently. And that's okay because they're using them. So that, in a nutshell, was my practice workshop. And have I seen results from that practice workshop? Absolutely. Is that the first time I've talked to my students about practice and talked to them about how to practice? No. But it is my first time going in depth with them as a group. And I definitely think it was more effective. Not to mention, we are human. And sometimes I think we can just forget, to tell everybody everything all the time. There's a lot going on in lessons. We have a lot that we're preparing for. And just doing it in a group ensured that I had covered it with everyone. Now, I don't pretend to have all the answers on practice at all, because every student is different. Every studio is different. Every studio culture is different. I mean, just there's a lot of things that are different, right? And honestly, I think that this is the most talked about issue in piano teaching. Now, incentives, games, charts, all of that kind of stuff, I do believe that can help. I do it. I know lots of people who do it. We all do it differently. But I believe that our biggest influence comes from the conversations that we continuously have in lessons, and helping students set up a practice time, clarifying what to practice, clarifying how to practice, and encouraging them to approach music differently if they need to each day can make a really, really huge difference. We can't control the hours, but we can control the tools that we give to our students. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on practice, and that was my practice workshop. I will be sending out my full practice workshop lesson plan to email subscribers. It should already be in your inbox. And if you want a copy, go ahead and sign up, because if I have done everything that I am supposed to do at this time of September 2025, it should be the freebie that you automatically receive. If you're listening at a later date, I'm also going to post it on my website. And before I go, a quick note that an upcoming episode will feature Dr. Molly Gabrian, who is author of Learn Faster, Perform Better, and she connects neuroscience directly to practicing. And I can't wait to share that conversation with you when it's ready, because her book heavily influenced my practice workshop, and I've been implementing her strategies, and holy cannoli, you guys, it is just, I cannot say enough amazing things about this gal. You are not going to want to miss it. So until then, keep encouraging your students, keep talking about practice, and remember, you don't need the perfect system. You just need the willingness to guide and support. You guys are awesome, and I will talk to you later. Bye.